Perfect. So once again, welcome to everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of, I understand your busy schedules. You'll be learning today all about giving your businesses an MOT, something that we often give to ourselves by going to the doctors perhaps once a year or every few years, and we certainly do on our cars, but it's very rare that we do this for our businesses. So today we're joined with Tom Stendhal from Hopkins Solicitors and Rod Fuller from Action Coach Mansfield. And they will be covering a variety of topics today, going from anything from onboarding and credit control through to employment contracts, policies and incentives. So if you're fit to go ahead and to start planning and thinking about your vision and your goals, I will hand it straight over to you, Rod. Enjoy, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks for the introduction, Gail. Yeah, Tom and I are really looking forward to sharing some great ideas with you today. But first of all, I just want to set the scene in the sense that the UK economy is about to enjoy its fastest growth period in more than 70 years, according to the Bank of England. They're expecting the economy to expand by 7.25% once the restrictions are lifted next month. And that's the highest period of growth since the war. And the Bank of England have also estimated that households have squirreled away 150 billion in extra savings over the past year, and they expect them to spend 10% of this as the economy returns to normal. So there's a fantastic opportunity for growth. And I think, those people that are perhaps in some of the trades relating to house improvements, I've certainly been talking to some roofing companies and window installers in the last couple of weeks who are sort of booked four months ahead, are starting to see some of that money that's been squirreled away that is actually now starting to be spent. But it can also be quite a dangerous time because, with companies expanding, they can get into situations where they're getting pressure on working capital, and they can actually start to struggle. And in some cases, more companies actually go bust post an economic winter than actually during the economic winter itself. So this afternoon, what I want to do is give you a great framework or chassis for which you can ensure that you're in the best position for both your business in the first part of my presentation, and then we'll look at ourselves to take you through this growth period and really get some success. So what I'm going to do is go through how you can build your business in the sense of a vehicle that will fly through its MOT and give you that success. What we'll do as we go through, and you'll see how I'll build the car, is that we're going to cover 10 areas. And what I'd like you to do is be brutally honest with yourself and score each area out of 10. And then we'll add these scores up at the end and see whether or not, what your MOT score is. So as Gail mentioned in the introduction, my name's Rod Fuller. I'm from Action Coach Mansfield. I'm really passionate about making sure that my clients are on a real growth trajectory. So the outcome for today is to learn, let's have some fun, take lots of actions and notes, actions that you can take so that your business and your life can move forward. So let's put our seatbelts on and strap in. So what does our vehicle for success look like? So first of all, what's really, really important, and this is the first area that I'd like to score yourselves out of 10, is think about, have you got a clear vision for your business? What does success look like for you? Certainly in the E-Myth by Michael E. Gerber and also Jim Collins and Good to Great, they're very good books focusing on getting clarity on what your vision is. If you get in the car, what destination are you putting into your sat nav, or are you just going to drive in a sort of a random direction and hope you end up where you want to get to? So do you have a 10-year vision of where you want to be? 10, 5, 3, 1. Is that written down or is it in your head? And what I say to people, if it's in your head and not documented, it's actually fantasy. So have a think about the clarity in terms of where you are with your vision for your business, and score yourself out of 10. Are you extremely clear? It's documented, it's written down, everybody knows about it, or is it still perhaps in your head, you haven't actually got it on paper yet, in which case you're probably more of a 1 or 2. So once we've got a really clear idea of where we're going, we need to think about the fuel we're going to put in our vehicle. And in this case, the fuel's belief. If we haven't got belief in what we're doing, we're not going to get anywhere. So it's really important to have a really strong belief around our vision, where we want to go in terms of confidence around what we're doing, in terms of the idea for our business and in ourselves and our ability to deliver. So score yourself out of 10. Tom and I are going to be offering some complimentary sessions, how you can to tap into those at the end of the presentation. And if you do believe your belief maybe is around a 5 or 6, that's something I can help you with. But it's really important that we have strong belief in terms of our vehicle. The next area we need to look at is the front wheel, and then we need to look at marketing. So do you know what level of lead generation you need in order to drive your business? Is it 10 leads a month, 100 leads a month? And where are those leads coming from? Who has ownership for the generation of those leads? Because it's really, really important in terms of any business plan that we actually have a really strong marketing plan that will support that. And if you do need 100 leads a month, are they coming from face-to-face marketing? I know not now that's coming back in terms of being reality, but a lot of that has been virtual recently. Is it digital marketing or is it more direct marketing? And how many strategies have you got? If you've need 100 leads, you'd need at least 5 strategies is what I'd be advising people. Why? Because that means you've got on average 20 leads from each strategy. If one strategy is not working, you've still got 80% of your lead flow coming in, and you've got a chance to fix that other 20%. Some people advise to go a bit deeper and go 10, but certainly 5 would be a minimum number of strategies in terms of your marketing. So again, out of 10 at the moment, how strong is your marketing in terms of delivering a consistent lead flow for you to drive your business? And once you've got that consistent lead flow, how strong is your conversion rate? Do you know what your conversion rate is? Really, really important that we actually know what our conversion rate is. Why? Because if your conversion rate's 10%, then those 100 leads would give you 10 customers. If your conversion rate's 20%, then you'll get 20 customers without actually having to spend any more on marketing. So who owns that marketing wheel in your business? Do you know what that conversion rate is? Are you looking at strategies around documenting your sales process, maybe looking at testimonials, introducing guarantees that you can actually improve that conversion rate and be much more efficient in terms of driving your business forward? So again, have a think about where you would score yourself out of 10. The next wheel we want to have a look at on our car is the operations wheel. And this is the area of your business that delivers your service or your product. And the key here is we want to be delivering a consistently high level of service. And the really word to focus in there is consistent and wow. So, how great would you score your your delivery of your services at the moment? Have you got systems and processes? Are you starting to put checklists in place so that you can make sure that you maintain that consistency? And do you actually measure that? Maybe you do a net promoter score or some other customer survey, so enable to get feedback to make sure that you are operating and delivering at a great level. One of my clients is just introducing a great measure, which is on time, in full, in spec. So that if you miss one of those 3 criteria, you score 0, so that they can actually get a really good handle on how efficient their operations are. So again, have a think about that and score yourself out of 10. The next wheel we're going to have a look at is our finance wheel, which also includes the admin and the HR within our business. Why is this important? Well, actually, the language of business is numbers, and we really need to get a handle on the numbers in our business. So do we do a monthly profit and loss account? Do we understand what our gross margins are and what our variable costs are? Do we understand what our fixed costs are? What our break-even point is? Recently, I was on an online conference, and Brad Sugar, who's the founder of Action Coach, actually interviewed Lord Sugar. And he asked Lord Sugar what would be one piece of advice that he would give to entrepreneurs and business owners. And Lord Sugar said to actually do a weekly profit and loss account, so at each week where you are in terms of the profitability of your business. So finance is really, really important. And ultimately, we want to be generating cash. So, do we do cash forecasting? Have we got a regular rolling 13-week cash forecast in place so we know that we're actually generating the cash within our business so that we can actually, as owners, then take dividends or take that out in order to meet the goals that we want to achieve. So finance, really, really important. So again, how strong do you think you are in those areas? Then we need to think about, well, how do we know that we're actually in the right direction? And this is an extension of finance, but it's really important. And I wanted to score this separately because it's really important that we've got the dashboard in our business, in our vehicle, in terms of giving visibility of the key numbers that's going to tell us that we're on track. So the analogy here in a car is on your dashboard, you're driving along, are you going too fast? Are you going too slow? Do you need to speed up? Are you going to overheat? Are you going to run out of fuel? Maybe that's the cash in this scenario. So have you actually got clear visibility of what those numbers might be? Your lead flow is probably a key number, maybe your conversion rate. Maybe we talked about that on time, in full, in spec percentage measure. All of these should be in one place, so you know that you're actually heading in the right direction in terms of the goals that you want to achieve for your business. Then we need to think about you as the business owner, and we'll talk about us in terms of our performance in the second part of my presentation this afternoon. But in terms of you as an owner, how much time are you spending on the business versus in the business? How clear are you in terms of having that time to set the strategy, measure whether you're actually moving and how fast you're moving towards achieving that vision and those strategies, and actually your own personal development as an owner, because as you grow, the business will grow. If you don't grow, then the business will stay still. So again, having to think about you as the owner in that MD role, how effective are you being? Are you getting 20% of your time on the business, or are you very much in the business doing the day-to-day work? And what's really, really important also for those businesses that do really well and succeed is for you as the owner to have someone alongside you, just making sure that you're staying on the road. And this may be a coach, which is the role that I fulfill for a lot of clients. It may be a mentor, it may be an accountability partner, and someone that you can trust and that you can really rely on, that can tell you and talk to you honestly from an outsider's perspective, how you're doing, are you spending time in the right areas, and those goals, that vision you set for your business, are you actually still on track for that? Or have you got you veered off and now you're on a different road and you've gone off on a tangent and you're heading in a totally different direction? So really, really important to have within the business for your overall success. And the last area to think about, just in terms of scoring ourselves out of 10, is, as the business grows, we're going to have people in the back seat. We're going to have some team. We're going to have to think about how are we recruiting those team? Have we actually got proper positional contracts and job descriptions? Do we have the right KPIs in place for our team? Does everyone have a number, for example, in terms of measuring their overall performance? So if you've got a team, it's worth thinking about how effective am I in terms of the recruitment and structuring of that team. So those are the 10 key areas that I actually use as a framework in terms of the business and the analogy of building our vehicle for success to drive where you want to get to. So what I'm just going to have a do now is just give you a couple of minutes. Hopefully you've gone through, as we've gone through each of those areas and scored out of 10. Scoring the MOT has given you a sense check, and we've got a couple of really good scores there. But ultimately it's about ensuring that when you enter that destination, into your sat nav, that you can actually reach it and be successful. So thanks for that. For the first part of my presentation, I'm just going to hand over to Tom now, who is going to go through his presentation for us.
That's great. Thanks, Rod. Yeah, some really good content there and some great energy from you as usual. I can already see there's one theme emerging here, which I'll cover a little bit to a certain extent, which is having those written processes and having the discipline to apply those to provide consistent service. And I can certainly recommend Michael Gerber's E-Myth book as well, which is really good on those topics. So as a quick background to Hopkins Solicitors, our business is over 100 years old, and we are a full service law firm dealing with all areas other than criminal law. So I do hope that you haven't come to this webinar hoping for advice on that area that we don't cover. We've over 70 staff spread across 5 offices in Mansfield, Ashfield and Nottingham. We're a growing firm, having acquired 2 other law firms and opened a new office in Sutton and Ashfield within the last 5 years. And we're a local business ourselves, so we understand some of these challenges from our own experience. I'm one of 5 equity partners in the firm, and I specialise in non-contentious commercial property and also business and company law. So there's 3 parts of our vehicle that I'd like to pick up on here, and the first of those is onboarding, so that's bringing clients on board, and credit control as part of the finance and operations wheels. So problems, issues can arise in this area if your customer is unclear about the extent of the product, service or the terms that apply, or if you've supplied a product or service and the customer fails to pay. So some issues that I've put down here as things to consider are consistency in the contracting process, so setting out and implementing a written customer journey workflow and sharing this with your team so every customer has a consistent experience every time. Carrying out some due diligence on your customer, so this can involve credit searches, credit insurance, you can set and monitor credit limits, properly identifying the business structure that they use. I'm going to cover that in a little bit more detail later on in the webinar, but if it's a limited company, then you might want to consider the fact that that the owners of that company will have limited liability, and you may want to consider personal guarantees from directors. Again, clarity between you and the customer about exactly what's being supplied, when it's being supplied, how it's being supplied, by who. Importantly, what's beyond the scope of the offering. So clearly defining that product or service should help you avoid what we would call mission creep, creeping in there. And having a credit control plan as well. So setting yourself up to avoid late or non-payment by creating and consistently implementing a credit control measures. Have a written agreement on price and terms of payment. You might want to request full or part payment on account. Make sure your customer's happy as soon as you finish the job, and then invoice promptly. Diarising to chase, or have an automated system to do that. There are products that will invoice and deal with that as part of your accounting package. And have a particular point at which you escalate and get solicitors involved to perhaps go through a court-led process to recover that money. There's some legal services that we can offer that might assist with that. So part of a good credit control process is going to include standard terms and conditions of trade, and these will provide consistency so that every customer contracts on the same terms. There's clarity of the terms of the contract and around what, when, how, and at what price. We can include provisions for late payment penalties and interest, and the benefit of that is they're all written down in one place. You don't have to rely on recollection of phone calls or trawling through a long email train that you might have had with the client about the product moving up to that level. It's also good housekeeping. So if you're setting your business up for sale or to work without you, then if anyone's coming in, assessing, carrying out due diligence on the business, then they can see what terms have been used in every contract. So it's good from that point of view as well. And if having put all that in place, there's probably always going to be the case where you might still find that there's some non-payment of debt, and our litigation team at Hopkins can help in resolving any issues or disputes in terms of scope of service or non-payment of debt. Whilst not within the scope of this webinar, and it's not particularly my area of expertise, but there are some things that you can do before issuing court proceedings, such as sending a letter before action, clearly setting out your case and giving a period of time to respond, putting forward an offer without prejudice, savers to costs, and that's a letter or an offer that can be used as evidence, that can't be used as evidence against you in legal proceedings, but it can be used to claim your own legal cost back if you can use it to show that you've made a similar or better offer earlier in those proceedings. And if you can pitch that right, then it can put pressure on the other party to settle or come back to the table. You could also present a statutory demand, which allows you to begin bankruptcy or company insolvency proceedings if the other party fails to pay that within 21 days. And that's because that can be used as evidence that they're unable to pay their debts as they fall due, which is one of the circumstances in which someone would be technically insolvent. So next up, the second issue I want to talk about relates to those people on the back seats of the vehicle who you choose to share your journey with. So employees or staff members. Problems can arise in this area if you recruit the wrong person for the role, that is the right seat but the wrong person, or if they aren't clear about what their role is and how it fits into the bigger picture, and that might be a right person but in the wrong seat. There might also be a lack of clarity on the terms of your relationship, and all of those issues and many others can ultimately lead to disputes or employment tribunal claims. There's some of the things to consider here are having some those same sort of consistent written processes that we talked about in the context of credit control, but applied to employees in terms of recruitment and induction processes. Clarity as to status. This is a hot topic at the moment with some high profile cases as to whether staff are employees, self-employed or intermediate worker status. You might have seen some news articles in relation to the likes of Uber and Hermes, the delivery apps. Clarity as to terms of the contract, so just clarifying job description, the normal sort of employment terms such as rate of pay, holidays, hours, pension and other types of perks. There's some legal compliance issues there, such as giving employees access to and contributing to an auto-enrolment workplace pension, and registering with the Information Commissioner's Office if you process personal data. That last one about data actually applies to any personal data that you process, not just for employees. And I think there might be a few links to in the chat box to links that will go to those two, speak to those two issues. Thinking about staff progression and incentives linked to targets that fit in with your goals and objectives of your business, and monitoring those on dashboards. So going back to what Rod said about that. You know, in terms of managing disputes and dismissal as well. A few, again, legal services that we can help you with to assist with those. Our employment team can assist with standardised employment contracts. So an employee is legally entitled to a written statement of terms of employment on or before employment commences, but the law only requires that certain terms in this are in this statement. Dealing with employment related incentives such as bonuses, having in place written grievance policies, so that's if an employee has a problem with their employer, and also disciplinary processes if an employer has a problem with their employees, for if and when those issues arise. We do actually offer an employment law retainer service, giving you access to our employment lawyers for a fixed annual premium, which includes a starting audit of those contracts and policies. That's one way to deal with that if you'd like to speak to any one of our colleagues about that. The third issue I'd like to just touch on here is succession planning, and that's part of your vision. So this is what you see as you look through the car windscreen. There's a bit of a murky picture on that slide. So hopefully after today, you'll be able to come up with a more focused vision on where you want to go. Problems can arise in this area if you're not clear about your goals, or if all your actions are not aligned to make and made towards those goals. Some of the things to consider here are knowing what you want to achieve with your business, considering the exit plan at the outset. Do you want to build the business to sell it to a management team that you're going to build? Do you want to sell to a third party or a competitor, or hand it on to the next generation of your family? Just considering that and thinking about whether what you're doing is working towards that. A lack of thought and action on this can lead to a business relying too heavily on you, one individual, which can sometimes turn a business from an asset to a liability. Just thinking about as well who's important to that vision, and how do we retain and incentivize those people to align with that. So again, some of the things that we can perhaps help with to help with those issues. My commercial team can assist with succession planning and incentivizing staff by providing advice in relation to how companies are owned and run, and using company shares potentially to differentiate of different classes to offer to key staff a stake in the business. So just before I go back to Rod, just to reiterate that as well as Rod's sort of offer, I'm also offering those attending the webinar today the opportunity to have a complimentary 30-minute fact find where we can go through a health check of your business and discuss these and other issues as applied to your specific business. If you'd like to take us up on that, if you could please private message Gail, and me or one of my colleagues will contact you to make an appointment for that. So it's now back to Rod for the second half, where we're going to focus on the driver.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Tom. There's some brilliant suggestions there, and you know it is important to get the right advice, particularly around some of those issues around employment succession. So brilliant, thanks for that, Tom. So for the second part of what I want to talk about for the next 10 minutes, the first part was around the car, the vehicle for success. And there's some great scores, some really good scores that came through in the poll there. So now it's about thinking about ourselves. And I referred to that in terms of the driver as us, the owner of the business. You know, how are we at the moment, and how can we actually look at ourselves and grow and develop our performance to actually enhance the overall performance of the business. First of all, I'd like you just to focus on those 4 words that you see on screen there: clarity, focus, action, and results. So clarity, how clear are you on at the moment in terms of what you need to do in order to be successful? You know, do you have that vision set out? Do you have a 5, 10, 5, 3, 1 year vision and plan as to where you want to get to? And then very much we break that 1 year down into 90-day goals. So we're very clear what we need to be achieving in the next 90 days in order to move ourselves forward. Focus. You know, do we know what we really need to focus on at the moment in order to achieve those goals, and how committed are we to doing it? You know, in a lot of ways, the only person that can really answer that is yourself, in terms of holding the mirror up, in terms of knowing that you are 100% committed and really focused on achieving what you need to achieve. Action. How action orientated are we? You know, the only way we're going to move forward, the only way we're going to grow is by taking action. So if we're really clear of where we want to go, we've got that focus, we've got that commitment, it's now about making sure we're taking the actions that we need to do to move ourselves forward. And results. You know, do we know what these look like, both for us, both in terms of the business and where the business needs to get to, but also for our life? You know, what are our personal goals? Have we got those aligned to the business? And do we have visibility so we know when we're achieving these results? So what I want you to think about now, and what I'm going to share in the next few minutes, is sort of launching us into the sort of post-COVID world with a bit more focus and energy around ourselves and how we can be successful. Because we've had BC and AC before Corona and after Corona. And, you know, quite a lot of the things that have changed within that Corona periods, the lockdown periods, you know, are going to be with us in terms of how we move forward. So we've looked at the business, we understand where the businesses are in terms of its MOT, you know, now we're going to look at ourselves. And the way that I'd like to do this is use the analogy, whereas with the business, we use the vehicle. In terms of our own identity, I want to use what's called the identity iceberg in terms of how we can view ourselves. And what sits above the water in terms of an iceberg, it's probably 11 to 15% of an iceberg sits above the water. The majority is actually below. So for ourselves, this can also work the same. So what people can see on the outside is they can see the results that we're achieving. They can see the actions we're taking, how our behaviors are, and also the level of decisions, the type of decisions that we're making. So, you know, we can look at the results that we scored in terms of our MOT. Maybe that was a 60 or 70, you know, so maybe that's 7 out of 10. So if we want those results to move from a 7 to an 8 or 7 to a 9, how can we improve those results? Well, actions, we talked about that in terms of the previous slide. You know, how good are the actions we're taking at the moment? Are we taking enough actions in order to move to get the right results? You know, what's our behavior like? You know, how's our mindset? And I'll touch on that in a bit more in a few more minutes. But also the decisions. Are we taking decisions? Are we procrastinating? You know, in terms of holding things back. If we made those decisions quickly, that would have a great impact on our behavior. We're probably going to take more actions and actually see an improvement in our results. So all of these things precede the ability to drive and have an impact on our ability to get better results for ourselves and for our business. So what's below the water? Well, there's 4 levels and 4 areas that sit below the water. And the first area of those is skills. So, you know, maybe we're not getting the results because we need to learn some more skills. Certainly, we talked about, you know, BCAC, there's a lot more virtual marketing now, you know, and being video. Maybe you've had to go online and learn how to do online videos, for example. But anybody can learn a new skill. All it takes is time, effort, and focus, and we can learn a new skill. So maybe think about, if you're not getting the results, are there some skills that you need to learn in order that it'll improve your decisions and actions that are ultimately going to improve the results for you and for your business. Beliefs. So beliefs are things that you currently hold to be true. And so it's a bit like the things that also like I will or I won't do. But, you know, if you believe that you've got a fantastic business and you're fantastic at sales and that you're going to be successful, then, you know, you will be. But if you have limiting beliefs or negative beliefs, maybe you believe you're not good at something, then if we keep telling ourselves this, then we actually then, you know, it becomes true. As I said at the start, a belief is something that you currently hold to be true. And those limiting beliefs can actually hold you back because it's probably going to make you more indecisive, not make great decisions, not take the right actions or get the results you want. So it's worth thinking about your belief structure at the moment, and particularly if there's any that's holding you back. And again, there are methods that we can actually address those. So it's worth having a session with me at some stage after today's webinar. I'm more than happy to look at those for you. Values. values a bit more universally accepted principles like integrity and honesty. And these are sort of more about what's right and what's wrong, as opposed to beliefs as will I or won't I do something, or can I or can't I do something. You know, so and there'll be a belief structure that sits around those values. And these are really important to question, because particularly as we're getting higher up in those scores, to get that extra bit of growth in ourselves and in the results we want, you know, it's really important to challenge those values and beliefs and understand what impact they're having. And at the last area, in terms of the below the water and the bit that's hardest to shift, is our identity. So as the business grows, maybe we move in terms of being self-employed to a manager, maybe we move from manager to owner status within the business. You know, maybe we feel as though we're developing into a leader, but where we move and how quickly we move in terms of our identity will have a big impact in terms of our decisions and our actions, and ultimately the results that we're getting. So it's worth thinking about where you are in terms of your current identity and where you need to move to, and if by moving your identity it's actually going to get better results for you. And the iceberg sits in water. You know, that's the environment that the water sits in, that the iceberg sits in. But we actually have an environment that sits around us. And it's really important to have a think about these, because these also have a big impact on the results that we get, both for ourselves and our business. So there's 4 key areas I want to talk about in terms of the environment that we need to be aware of. First of all is the physical environment. You know, so what is the physical environment that you're operating in at the moment? And this has become quite important, particularly when people are working from home. You know, because some of people might be, you know, at the dining room table or hunched over the kitchen breakfast bar. You know, is that a great environment to actually be achieving good results at the moment for you? So it's worth considering that. The second area is time. So where are you placing yourself in terms of time at the moment? We talked about working on the business versus in the business. So do you have a default diary? How structured are you with your time to be making sure that you're getting the most effective use of that time? And certainly books like for Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about the 4 quadrants in terms of analyzing your time. And that's really, really important. The third area is mindset. You know, it's really important to understand, you know, what's happening in your mind at the moment. We talked about the importance of belief to drive the vehicle, because Napoleon Hill, you know, Think and Grow Rich, probably one of the great books in terms of personal development, says whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. So that mindset is really, really important. And that also links into the beliefs that we talked about earlier. The other area of the environment is who you associate with, you know, because as Jim Rohn says, we become the average of the 5 people we associate the most with. So, you know, if we're associating with highly, maybe millionaires who have got effective businesses that are really profitable, you know, those are the sort of people that we're going to start to learn from. And the chances are we'll start to become successful and achieve some of those things ourselves. So it is important to see who's around us in terms of our environment that we're actually being influenced by. The next thing I just want to have a look at is, you know, this idea of having more knowledge or less interference, because this is about thinking about how can we be at our best. If we've scored well on and we've passed our MOT and our vehicle's really good, what about ourselves? You know, we've just talked about the iceberg and some of the things that can improve the results for us, but what about, you know, this idea of knowledge versus interference? And, you know, in terms of our time, we can split our time. If we think about 80% versus 20%, should we be spending 80% of our time gaining more knowledge, or 80% of the time actually reducing the level of interference? So what I'd just like to do now, I'm just going to launch a second poll just to see what people think in terms of the question. Let me just launch the poll. Is to be at your best, where would you spend 80% of your time? Seeking knowledge or removing interference? Again, it's an anonymous poll, so if you can just put your choices in, that would be brilliant. Yeah, so that's interesting. So I think I'll just end the polling now. So I'll just share the results with you. So we've got a 50-50 split at the moment between seeking knowledge and removing interference. So actually, the answer is, one person's got it right. So we've got 50%, is that in order to be at our best, we should 20% of the time we should be finding knowledge, 80% we should be removing the interference. Why? Because the biggest barrier to our success is actually not knowing what to do. It's actually doing what you know. Most business plans and marketing plans fail, not because they're great plans, but because of the execution, because we're actually not doing what we know. So if we can remove that interference, we're more likely to be successful and make much more progress and actually achieve the things that we want to achieve. So maybe have a think about the things that you know that you actually, that you're not doing at the moment that you should be, that's going to move you forward. Make a note of those, and that's something that maybe you can address after today's webinar. So just also to finish up on, just another area around being at our best is concept about, have we found our speed? You know, so we've got a great vehicle, we've got passed its MOT, we've got 2 great scores, we're flying in terms of the actual vehicle itself, but what about us, you know, in terms of the speed that we're moving at? And it's really important that we think about this. Again, it's the idea here is that how we can be at our best. So one of the things we need to do is learn fast. So things have been changing, we've needed to adapt. We've talked about the fact that this is going to be the biggest growth period in the economy since the war. So we need to be thinking, how can we learn? How can we adapt as quickly as we can? And the most important thing there is to change fast. And there was a survey done, and again, they reported this in the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And there was a study of 25,000 people who had actually failed. And they failed as they lacked the ability to make decisions, and they procrastinated. Whereas several hundred millionaires who had made decisions quickly and then changed them slowly, obviously were very successful. So it's important, it's actually less important on what you decide than actually what you decide to do. And that was the point about removing interference and not doing what we know. So we need to make decisions and we need to change fast. And ultimately we need to maintain drive. You know, so once we've got that momentum, we know where we're going, we've got our destination, our sat nav. If we can be at our best, if we can learn fast, change fast, maintain our drive and energy, then we're going to be more successful and get to our destination much quicker. So thanks for listening to that. Hopefully there's been some actions and some takeaways. I've got you thinking about some of the things that may be changing, some of your actions, some of your behaviors that's going to help you grow. So the next thing I'll do is just going to hand back to Tom for the second part of his presentation.
That's great. Thanks, Rod. Yeah. So when you're learning fast and maintaining energy, as Rod was talking about there, you might want to consider some safety features for your vehicle. And I'm going to touch on some options that you might want to tick in the brochure for your vehicle for success. So firstly, I'm going to look at business structure and your own personal liability there. I'm looking at this in the context of your own business, but this is also relevant when assessing customers or others that you might want to do business with. So there's 4 main business structures. There's a sole trader, partnership, limited company or LTD, and a limited liability partnership or LLP. And I'm just going to take you through those in turn. So a sole trader is a self-employed individual. This structure requires very little administration to set up and run, and there's no requirements to publish accounts, so you can maintain some privacy there. The downside is that the individual is personally responsible for the debts of the business, so anyone owed money by the business can pursue the individual's personal assets, and that will include their home. A partnership is a group of individuals, again self-employed, but in business together. Again, it requires very little administration to set up and run, but with more people to share the load, it can assist with holiday cover and investment and spreading that around. As with the sole trader, the individual partners are personally responsible, and each partner can bind all the other partners to a contract or liability. So you do need to choose your partners wisely. It's also worth having a partnership agreement to ensure that partnership isn't capable of being dissolved by any of the partners simply on notice, and also to define, amongst other things, the limits of the partner's authority in terms of binding them. A limited company is a separate legal person, and the liability of the managers, known as directors, and owners, known as shareholders, is limited to the sums that they put into the company. And so in most circumstances, anyone owed money by the business can't enforce that debt against those that own and run it. Main disadvantages are the additional cost of setting up and administering a company, and the requirement to publish certain information, including filing accounts with the company's regulator, Companies House. though for smaller companies that's very limited, so you probably wouldn't publish the accounts that you would get from your accountant. You can do a much more abridged selection. An LLP is like a partnership, but the LLP itself is a separate legal person similar to a company like that, and the liability of the partners now is limited to the money that they put in, again like a limited company. This structure tends to be used by professional practices such as solicitors. There are similar requirements in relation to publishing business information, and that's the price you pay for that limited liability. Any decision on which big business structure is right for you should really be based on both legal and accounting advice. So as lawyers, we'd always recommend adopting a business structure with limited liability to act like a seatbelt, protecting you in the event of a crash. However, you might get different advice as to which is the most tax efficient or the best from an accounting point of view. The next thing I'd like to just talk about is dealing with events that might befall a company. So our second safety feature designed to deal with events that might happen in the life of a typical company. And to give a bit of a flavour on this, I'm just going to play a short video here of an extract of a grilling of Donald Rumsfeld, who was US Secretary of Defense in the late 1970s.
There are reports that there is no evidence of a direct link between Baghdad and some of these terrorist organizations.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there's some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
Excuse me, but is this an unknown unknown?
I'm not.
Several unknowns, and I'm just wondering if this is an unknown.
I'm not going to say which it is.
Mr. Secretary,
I'm right here. I'm right here.
So I really like that general application concept there, but applying it to our business, there are events that we already know about and we can deal with now. There's also some things that we can contemplate might happen in the course of running a company, but we don't know if or when they will happen. And there's also obviously things that we haven't even contemplated. It's impossible to provide for now. A shareholders agreement can help to deal with some known unknowns, and those are things like what if a shareholder wants to sell their shares? Can we get them to offer them to existing shareholders first? What happens if a key shareholder dies or leaves the business? Can we require them to give the shares back? Can we stop their next of kin becoming entitled to the shares and interfering with the business? Will there be a ready source of funding to buy back those shares? What happens if a shareholder transfers shares to her husband and then they separate? Can we require them to give the shares back? What if a shareholder's given a personal guarantee for company's debts? Can that shareholder ensure that the company doesn't increase its lending exposure that might create a personal liability for that shareholder that's given that guarantee? What happens if shareholders get an offer to buy the company? Can they force other minority shareholders to sell? Can the minority shareholder ensure that they participate in that sale? And in the case of a company with a standard constitution of either what we call Table A or model articles of association, and if there's no shareholders agreement, then the answer to all those questions is a no, and that may lead to a difficult situation for that company. These types of issues need to be considered in the context of a particular company and its specific structure and circumstances. So unfortunately, there's no such thing as a standard shareholders agreement, and that does kind of need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Next then, just looking at the third safety feature, which relates to the garage that you put your car in, the premises from which you trade your business. When you take a residential tenancy, you can probably expect the landlord to be responsible for repairs and maintenance to the roof, the building structure, the boiler and other items, as well as much of the legal compliance. Commercial letting is very different, and these matters are capable of being agreed and negotiated between the parties. In most commercial leases, the landlord will expect to take the rent as a passive investment yield, and so they will expect all other costs and the hassle of legal compliance to be covered by the tenant. and that includes cost of repair, electricity and gas safety checks, and the cost of building insurance. Depending on the terms of the lease, you might also be required as a tenant to put a property into a better state of repair than you take it. So it's worth taking advice from a solicitor and a surveyor when you take on that lease. Also worth mentioning a few legal compliance issues here, such as health and safety at work policies, carrying out fire risk assessments, the requirement to identify and manage any asbestos that's present in business premises, and the requirement to obtain gas safety certificates and 5-yearly electrical safety certificates. All of those obligations generally for the tenant of a commercial property to sort out. So again, just to remind everyone, before we go into questions, just to reiterate our offer to everyone here today for a free 30-minute fact find and health check. And again, if you just private message Gail to take take me up on that, and one of me or my colleagues will contact you to make an appointment in relation to that. So that's me. I'm not sure who's going to take it from here in terms of dealing with any questions that we've got.
So yeah, there are actually 2 questions that's been forwarded to me, Tom.
Okay.
Is it okay if I just read them out and,
yes, please, yeah.
and see where it goes? Okay, so with terms and conditions, within my business, what if a customer has their own terms and conditions? Which one would apply with one outruling the other?
Okay, yeah, that's a common situation. Good question as well that I didn't actually cover earlier on. So this kind of goes back to the fundamentals of contract law, but will depend on the facts of the particular case. So standard terms will only be incorporated into a contract if they're brought to the attention of the other party before or at the point the contract's created. And that's when a clear offer is made by one party and accepted by the other. So for example, there's no good putting your terms and conditions on the back of a delivery note, because by then the contract would have been made and it's too late. You can get into what's called the battle of the forms, where one party makes an offer based on their terms and conditions and the other party purports to accept that offer on their terms. The acceptance is likely to be construed as a counter offer, which the first party might then unwittingly accept by its conduct by supplying the goods or acquiescing to those terms. So if you can sort of standardise your contracting process and have a written offer which you ensure is the only one that's capable of being accepted, and perhaps having a signed paper contract with those terms on it, because then there's kind of no argument as to which one's been accepted. I think you can also probably do that electronically by having a tick box thing and build that into your website as well. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thanks very much for clearing that up, Tom. And Danny, I hope that answers the question for you. There was one other question. You touched on about dealing with what happens to a business upon death.
Okay.
How does that actually work within the wills?
Oh yeah. So again, good question, and it's again not something I'd covered in the webinar, more of a sort of personal legal issue. And again, our firm can help with those personal issues. We do sort of conveyancing and wills and probate and all those sorts of things that you would expect us to do. Also quite a nice cheerful one to end on that. Thank you. So there's perhaps yeah, so as I say, one of the notable exceptions from what we talked about earlier. So shares in a company from which you run your business, or any other business assets if you run as a self-employed or partner. So those are personal assets and liabilities which need to be accounted for like any other asset. So it's worth thinking about those in the context of your will. And again, it's kind of going back to that point about having a clear sort of vision of succession planning and where you want that to be, and then for implementing that as well as in the business, but also kind of in your personal side of things. And that's where those wills sort of come into play. Another thing to probably consider here, widening it out a little bit, is what might happen if you're incapable of making decisions. And this is where lasting powers of attorney also help to come in. And again, that's another thing that we can advise in. My wills and probate colleagues will deal with that, and then again, that just gives you sort of peace of mind in relation to that. And again, you know, if anyone wants to take up the health check, that's something that we can cover in that as well.
Perfect. Okay, well, thanks again, Tom, for that. And so I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. If you do, please just raise your hand, and we'll be happy to take those. Okay, so there's no other questions. So I think that just leads me to say a huge thank you to Tom Stendhal from Hopkins Solicitors and Rod Fuller from Action Coach Mansfield. They both gave us an incredible insight and overview as to what you should be doing to conducting an MOT on your business. Again, more than happy if you go to either of our websites. We will be able to offer you that free consultation. I received messages already, so I will make sure that those people are contacted. And thank you again for your time, and I wish you all a fabulous afternoon.